Hey folks, Dr. Gerstmar with Aspire Natural Health here. It is a gorgeous, beautiful day here in what we normally don't say, sunny Seattle, but today it is sunny Seattle, so I wanted to take a moment today to talk about the sun. So conventional wisdom, unfortunately, is still way behind saying that the sun is dangerous and we definitely need to avoid the sun if we want to cut our risk of skin cancer. All right, so it's important that we break this down because the short answer is the sun is not dangerous. Like anything, too much is bad, but also too little is bad. And it's that in-between zone where we get most of the benefit. So let's talk about the negative, right? There's skin cancer. Now, it's important when we talk about skin cancer that we really break it down, and fundamentally there are two types of skin cancer. There is the melanoma skin cancer, and there are several other types that are the non-melanoma skin cancers. Now, it's important to realize that when we talk about skin cancer, the deadly type is that melanoma. Right? Absolutely a very dangerous, very deadly disease. The non-melanoma skin cancers, which are known as basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma, do kill a few people, can be dangerous, but are overwhelmingly not dangerous. They tend to just sit on the skin, and it has to really advance very far before they reach down through the skin into the body, metastasize or spread, and cause serious complications. So the vast majority of those non-melanoma skin cancers show up as, lesions or wounds on the skin. A dermatologist checks them out and cuts them out, and you're all done, okay? And the melanomas are the dangerous ones. So, does sun exposure cause cancer? And the answer is, well, it depends. Sun exposure has been definitively linked to the basal cell and squamous cell carcinomas, the type of cancers, the non-melanoma type of cancers, the type of cancers that, by and large, are not particularly dangerous. Now, there is some debate about melanomas and whether skin cancer, sun exposure causes melanomas. But here there's a few damning facts. So let me just say, there is debate. The case for saying sun exposure causes melanomas is far from airtight. Okay, so they'll lump it together and say sun exposure causes skin cancer. Well, it does, right? When it comes to those non-melanomas, it's pretty cut and dry that sun exposure is responsible for those. When it comes to melanoma, the case is far from complete. And here's some of the damning things, right? Evidence shows, epidemiologic evidence, like when they look at people who have skin cancer and they find that people who work outdoors, like construction workers or other people who tend to get a lot of sun exposure, have less melanoma than people who work indoors. So office workers at a higher risk in epidemiologic data of getting melanoma than people who work outside. Well, that's pretty damning, right? Other places, so melanoma commonly occurs in places that aren't exposed to the sun, like in the armpits or in the butt cheeks, basically the inside of your butt, right? So areas that most people are not getting exposure to. If it caught, like in the example of the non-melanoma skin cancers, most of them are on the face, also, on the arms or legs, places that get a lot of sun exposure. You're not seeing those type of cancers in the armpits or in the groin or in the butt, basically, right? Areas that don't get sun exposure, but that is the case with melanomas. So we have some pretty damning evidence when it comes to saying sun exposure causes melanomas. Well, what we can see is people who tend to get the most sun tend to have the least amount of melanomas, which that doesn't make much sense if we're saying sun causes melanoma. And then when melanomas appear, they appear in places that get less sun. So for my 2 cents, I am wholly unconvinced of the unconvincing, equivocal evidence that melanoma is related to sun exposure. So, for my interpretation of the literature, what we see is that sun exposure does cause the non-melanoma type of skin cancers, and it does not, or at least the evidence is very weak, that it causes the very dangerous melanomas. All right. A couple other pieces. Sun exposure does seem to be linked to wrinkling. So the more sun exposure you get, the more you're at risk for wrinkles. Okay, so a vanity thing, right? I mean, let's face it, we all have some vanity, right? None of us want to be all wrinkly and look like a raisin, right? Now on to the good side. So what does sun exposure do for us, right? Well, we're only just starting to get a handle on this because for so long we've been told that sun exposure is bad for us. So most of you have heard of vitamin D by now, and sun exposure is the way that we naturally get our vitamin D. Right? For millennia upon millennia, there were no vitamin D supplements. There are a few foods that are richer in vitamin D, like liver, for example, or cod liver oil, right? Or cod liver oil, that kind of thing. But by and large, human beings got their vitamin D from sun exposure. Right? So again, kind of thinking at it from an evolutionary perspective, if we need vitamin D, and we do, and if our primary source is from sun exposure, which it normally is, then would our bodies have developed mechanisms so that we get the beneficial sun exposure, but that it isn't too harmful for us? And the answer is, I believe that's absolutely true. Okay, so I think, again, sensible sun exposure makes sense. Now, it goes beyond just vitamin D, and again, we're beginning to scratch the surface, but we understand that sun exposure lowers blood pressure, and it seems to do that through some vitamin D independent mechanisms. Sun exposure is also good for mood, so sun exposure increases the amount of serotonin in the brain, right? So we know just a few of the likely many ways sun exposure also is linked to some beneficial immune changes as well. So we've got vitamin D, we've got its effects on the blood vessels and lowering blood pressure, on mood, and on immune function. Right? So sun exposure is a healthy and normal thing, just like we talk about we need to eat good food, we need to get sleep, we need to get some exercise. We also need to get some sun exposure. So let's talk about safe sun exposure. So the biggest danger, right, the link, if it exists at all, between melanomas and sun exposure is really around severe sunburns, especially early in life severe sunburns. So the trick when we're talking about sun exposure is to avoid getting burned. Right? And we do that just by being sensible. Look, each of us has a different skin color, ranging, and there are scales you can find ranging from very deep black to extreme, well, I guess albino on the other side, but extremely pale, red hair, blue eyes, very little, melanin, the color in our skin, right? And bottom line is, the darker you are, the more protected you are from sun exposure, right? So our own natural sunscreen is going to be the color in our skin. So if you're a very pale individual, and you know this, and you burn very easily, you're going to need to be much more careful. And as opposed to if you are a very dark-skinned individual, you can take a tremendous amount of time outside in the sun. Right? Now the good news is for most of us, unless we are on that extreme pale end, that some sun exposure causes our bodies to naturally produce more melanin. That's how we get a tan, right? And thereby protect us from the sun. So if you're like me, or like us here in Seattle, where we spend a big chunk of our year without sun, we tend to get very pale. So those initial sun exposures that you're going to get, you need to be careful, right? Your defensive mechanisms, the tanning, the color in your skin is not there, and you're much more vulnerable. As you kind of move through your summer or your sun time and you get some tan to your skin, you have some natural protection, you can take a lot more sun exposure. So it's all about being sensible and saying, look, know yourself. If your skin color is very fair and you burn very easily, you need to be much more sensible about your sun exposure. If you're darker and you don't burn as easily, you have a lot more leeway. And as you get out there and get some color in your skin, you will be able to take more sunlight. All right, so sensible sun exposure is about knowing yourself and pulling yourself out before you burn. So because we know sun does good things, I am a big fan of saying, hey, get out in the sun for a period of time that is sensible for you. Maybe several minutes to several hours, right? But you want to get a decent sized dose of sun exposure. And then if you're going to continue being out in the sun past that, you're on a hike or you're working outside or you're just outside on the beach or something, right? Then you need to apply some protection. And that can be as simple as 1, just getting out of the sun, right? Getting some shade. 2, apply clothes. And 3, apply sunscreen. Now, the current advice, again, the conventional advice is sun is bad, apply sunscreen, apply it liberally, apply it often. And there's some, again, don't let yourself burn, so apply some sunscreen. But it's important to note that sunscreens have a lot of nasty ingredients in them, right? A recent study that came out that I'll link to here talked about how some of the common sun-blocking ingredients disrupted sperm function, right? Not a good thing, even for those of us who aren't looking at having more kids. When it affects sperm function, we know that it has probably affecting other cells in our body too. So, I really recommend that you search out and find some safer alternatives. Now, no affiliation, but the Environmental Working Group, that's the E for environmental, W for working, G for group, so EWG.org has a whole section of their website devoted to safe cosmetics and safe sunscreens. So if you're trying to choose a safe sunscreen, I recommend you go over to EWG.org, check out what's there, and pick one of the better ones without some of these nasty ingredients in it. Then I recommend get safe sun exposure. Right? Again, the sun is strong, so flipping that conventional wisdom on its head, the sun is strongest between about 10 and 2, depending on your location, but when the sun is high in the sky. And so if you're trying to get a calibrated dose to get some vitamin D production, to get some of the beneficial mood, blood pressure, heart effects, right, and immune system, then you really do want to get some of that strong sun, but you want to be sensible about it, not burn yourself and not get too much. Right? If you're going to stay out longer than that, you'll either want to put on a hat or, you know, a long sleeve shirt, get in the shade, or use one of the safer sunscreens. All right? So contrary to popular advice, there is no good, strong evidence, though you hear it said over and over, that sun exposure causes cancers, including melanoma. Well, no. It does cause those basal cell and squamous cell carcinomas, which typically are easily found and easily remedied. Right? There is no strong evidence that causes the deadly type of skin cancer called melanoma, and if anything, it might help protect against melanomas, okay? Since we know that those who get the most sun exposure tend to have the least amount of melanomas. And it does a lot of beneficial stuff for us, including making vitamin D. Now, the other side of this, I'll touch on briefly, ways to protect yourself and your sun exposure is your diet. So, it's been shown that, for example, like carotenoids, which can be beta-carotene, is that orange color in carrots, right? If anybody has ever gone on a carrot cleanse or a juicing binge and either eaten a ton of carrots or juiced a whole bunch of carrots and drank a lot of carrot juice, what you'll see is after a little while your skin starts turning a little orangey, and that's because a lot of those carotenoids that you're consuming end up getting put into your skin and acting as an antioxidant, a protectant in your skin. So a healthy diet rich in plant foods, especially the very nutritious ones, with things like beta-carotene, right, and the other carotenoids, which are your colored vegetables, right, eating large quantities of those can serve to bolster your antioxidant reserve in your skin and help protect you. And a lot of people have found that when they add, you know, spices, vegetables, lots of nutrients into their diet, they find that their sensitivity to the sun markedly goes down. And just throw it in there, one supplement that seems to be helpful is something called astaxanthin. So you'll see it's kind of the reddish orange color. It's one of the things that they boast about krill oil that makes krill oil better. Well, you can get a supplement of astaxanthin. And if you're looking, you know you're going to be out in the sun, you know you're going to get this exposure, you can, besides eating, again, please don't let this be a replacement for eating fruits and vegetables and other nutrient-rich foods, but you can bolster that by taking some astaxanthin in, say, the month or a couple of months before you're going to go out. You probably still even get some benefit from days or weeks, but we know you can get more by loading it back in time. Loading up your skin with these antioxidants, right, and protectives to make yourself less vulnerable. And we see that on a regular basis. So things you can do, right? Get sensible sun exposure because it is healthy for you. It's also good for your mood, which is a good thing too. If you're going to stay out longer, you know, protect yourself from burning. If you're going to use sunscreens, go to EWG.org, check out their safe list and get a good one, and eat a healthy, nutritious diet. And you could consider supplementing with some of those nutrients as well to help protect yourself. All right, sun exposure is a good thing. Summer is coming. Get outside, get some sensible, safe sun exposure, build your vitamin D reserves, and do a good thing for your body and your mind. Till we talk again next time, this is Dr. Gerstmar from Aspire Natural Health. You can reach us at aspirenaturalhealth.com or facebook.com/aspirenaturalhealth. We help people with autoimmune diseases, gut dysfunctions, and other hard-to-treat cases. We don't give up on our patients. We're constantly learning and trying to get better. All right? Until next time, folks, let's say it again. This is Dr. Gerstmar. Until we talk again.